Let your manna fall from heaven. Shower down your word from up above. Grace and truth are what we're craving. Manifest your blessings and your love. Here with your midday manna.
Good afternoon and welcome to Midday Manna, the program that sets out to highlight the works and lives of persons who are making great contributions to our society or community. Here with me this afternoon is Reverend Delroy Burley from the Associate Pastor at the Calvary Meridian Church. And he's going to be telling us a bit about his lifestyle, a little bit about his ministry, and we are so happy to have you here with us today. So let's get into our discussion and tell me a little bit about yourself.
So first and foremost, I want to say thank you for inviting me and for having me on your program. It's a pleasure to be here. Just to say that, as you have said before, as you've introduced me, I want to thank you for introducing me. My name is Reverend Delroy Burley. I am the pastor, or the associate pastor at the Calvary Meridian Church. I am happily married to Katrina Reese Burley. I am also the father of a 2-year-old daughter who is Serena Burley. I would consider myself as one who is hardworking, who has an enthusiastic demeanor, one who sees the positives in every situation there is. And I try my best to aim at life in that sense, because whenever you try to be negative, it also demeans life and also the aspect of us reaching further in life. One of the things that I consider about myself also is that I often try to look for ways to improve the way I perform, whether at work, whether at play, whether in socialization. I always try to improve wherever I can, where possible. So that's a nutshell about me a little bit. So as we continue to converse, I hope to share more in that regard.
Well, Reverend Delroy, you were born in Jamaica.
Yes, please.
And you came to Barbados through, well, it was love that brought you to Barbados. But tell me a little bit about your growing up years in Jamaica, what it was like, your call to ministry, and how you actually got to be here in Barbados.
Well, how can I put it now? Well, I was born and raised in Jamaica, St. James, Pitford, District Pitford. And during that time, I was raised with my younger brother, just two of us, and we would perhaps go to school together because we were going to school together and so on. So my aspiration at an early age was pretty much to work in the corporate environment. Ministry was never ever a part of my idea or concept to even think about. Even though I was a church-going person, or some person would say that I love to go to church. There's not a Sunday that I don't end up in church, whether to read a scripture or to share in some way or another. But for some reason, ministry wasn't one that really attracted me to become a pastor. And so during my early years, I went to my primary school, went to high school, passed through the curriculum system, passed my exams, moved on to college and so on. And while I was in Jamaica, I was trying to apply to get my pilot license because I wanted to be a pilot astronaut. But for me to do that, I would have to go to flight school and to do ground school, and then afterwards you learn about the plane, how to fly it, and so on. But when I checked it out, it was very expensive. At the time, it was $1 million
$1 million Jamaican dollars.
$1 million Jamaican dollars to be enrolled. So I didn't have the money at the time, and my parents didn't have the funds to support that idea. So I went to school, did some courses that would help me to get a job in the hospitality industry. I worked in various capacities. One I have shared, which is the environmental officer. I worked there as a sales representative in the sales department and so on. And I've been there for at least, I believe, about 13 months after graduating from school, after I went to training center and so on. I was there for about 13 months. After 13 months, I left because the distance from home to work was too great. It was actually about 21 miles, and I have to take about 4 transportation to get there. And sometimes I will get there late, and my boss would say to me, you have to improve, or else we have to let you go. So I said to myself, am I going to continue along this path, or am I going to take a job that's much closer to me that would help me to reach work much earlier? So I left within that 13-month period and got a job at the Bashka Trading Company, which was a town relatively close to my hometown. And that was in Westmoreland because at the time, just to go back a little bit further, my family, my father and mother got divorced when I was age 10. And that caused me to relocate from St. James to Westmoreland to live with my grandmother. And my grandmother is the mother for my mother. And during that time, she was a hardworking lady, Christian, and so on. So she would always instill in us, which is my brother and I, to go to church and to always do what is good. So it was there that I was schooled from primary school. I left my primary school in St. James and went to another primary school in Westmoreland. And from there, I went on to secondary school, and then on to training center, and then to college. And then that's where I got the job in the hotel industry, then to Bashka Trading Company Limited. While I was at Bashka Trading Company Limited as the loan officer and the storeroom clerk and so on, there was this lady who I was working with. She was training me, coaching me about how to deal with work problem and issues that may come upon me in terms of dealing with loans and so on, approving persons for their applications and so on to get a loan. She said to me that I see something in you and I want to share something with you. Lo and behold, I wasn't even expecting her to give me a CD that was entitled Jerry Thompson. This is an evangelist who was encouraging persons to go about the ministry of God. And there was one thing that he mentioned in that CD for no reason at all. I'm not even sure why she offered me this CD, but probably it's God who inspired her to say, you know what, this young man is going to be something good, something great. Let me share this idea with him. And she did. And I accepted.
The idea was that you would go into ministry, or what was the idea?
The idea was you seem as to be a good person, someone who is a Christian, which I was at the time. And she saw from me at that time that where I was working wasn't right for me. For whatever reason, she thought that I didn't question it, but I accepted the CD that she gave to me. And she said, you know what, I want you to take the CD and I want you to listen to it. So I took it home and I said, okay. Went home, played it, and there was one thing that stuck up with me until this day. The gentleman said that if you've tried everything, try God. But that wasn't to say that I wasn't trying God before, because I was very active in the church, doing all things, preaching, leading, praying, and so on. But at the time, why it affected me in a very positive way is that I have tried so many things. One of them is to become a pilot, and that didn't work out. I was trying to get a student loan, that didn't work out either. But then again, it seemed as if God is narrowing my career, or perhaps my path towards Him. And God is using the message by this person to tell me that I need to try Him a little bit more. And that is where I got my inspiration. Many persons may say that, that may not be an inspiration for many, because some persons have gone on to a near-death experience for them to realize that God is calling them. But for me, it was a bit different. It was just playing a CD and getting an inspiration message to help me to understand that God wants me for His kingdom. God wants me to work for Him in a very dedicated way. So I accepted what the gentleman was saying, and I said to myself, you know what? I've been active in the church. Pastors and members of the church have been asking me, why don't you go into the ministry? Why don't you, apply to the ministry and become a pastor? And I often give them this reply, I don't think I'm ready yet. I don't think I am up for the task. and so on. Because I often doubt myself in those areas, even though I was active. Because my grandma often said to me that ministry is very difficult because you have to deal with a lot of persons, deal with the different aspects of dealing with ministries and areas and so on. So I said, Mommy, I said, Grandma, I'm going to go ahead with it. If this is what God is calling me for, I'm going to go ahead with it. And I spent at least about 2 weeks praying and fasting about it because I really wanted God to tell me no. But I said, you know what? If this is what you want me to do, God, fine, let it be. So I spent 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks, praying and fasting about it, asking God to reveal to me what do you want me to do. And at the end of the 2 weeks, God revealed to me that I want you to work for the church. I want you to work for me. And at the same time, I went to my pastor, my home church, which was a Moravian church back home. And I said to him that I'm interested in the ministry. And he said to me, okay, then you need to write an application letter. Then at the same time, he sat down with me around the table, tell me how to write the application letter and who to write it to and so on. So I wrote the application letter the same year, and I think a couple months after, probably about 3 to 6 months after, I got a call from the head office saying that we have received your application and we'd like to call you in for an interview. So at that time, I was a bit ecstatic, happy about the situation, but at the same time, a bit nervous because I was saying to myself, this is what I'm getting into, ministry. And person often say to me that pastors will get a lot of money, and this and that, and so on. So I said, if God has called me into a situation, I'm sure that he would take care of me. Because it is often said that who God calls, he also equips, and he also provides for them.
That's true.
So I went in with an open mind and with a faith that I would rely upon God, that whatever comes, I am sure that you would take care of me, that you would help me through it. My favorite scripture passage is from Philippians 4 and verse 13, which says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I live on those words, knowing that God will help me through. So I applied, gone to the interview, God accepted, and they said that, okay, you will be going to seminary the following week. I was like, seriously, I was working at the time. So I said, I have to resign and then get myself prepared, get my bags packed, get some stuff prepared and so on. It was a rush. It was a rush. But I accepted the challenge, and I was accepted at the United Theological College of the West Indies, where I spent 4 years studying my degree for ministerial studies. So it was a wonderful experience for me. And after I graduated, before I graduated, I was engaged with this young lady who was in Barbados.
Tell me, before you get to the engagement part, tell me how you met this young lady, Katrina Reese.
Yes, Katrina Reese. At the time, I was posted. I was already at UTC, which was seminary, and I was on my first year summer assignment, and I was assigned in St. Elizabeth, which is a parish in Jamaica, specifically or particularly to Bethlehem Moravian Church. That was the campus chapel at the time, because there was a teachers college at the time where I went, and I was the student pastor there. So one night, before I went to bed, I was on my computer, and I don't know for what reason I was on Facebook, and I saw this message popped up on my screen saying, you have a friend request. When I look at the time, it was about 11 o'clock, so I said I was about to go to bed. Who is this person sending me this message? So I looked at the message, and I saw that it was Katrina Reese. Before I accepted her request, I looked into her profile, did some little research on the site as well to find out who is this person. And I realized that she's a Moravian, but not only a Moravian, but that she was also from Barbados. So, okay, all right, let me just go ahead and accept her request. And I accepted the request. And then she shoot me another message saying, hi, I am Katrina Reese Burley. I realize that you were a student pastor in the Moravian Church. Tell me about yourself and so on. And I said, okay, And I started conversing with her, texting with her, and so on, telling about myself and how I got into the ministry and so on. And that's where it started. We went on for a few hours. I think we left offline about 3 o'clock in the morning because we were so engaged in conversation online. So, I mean, after that, we have grown to, with each other in such a way that we have scheduled a time to meet every single day. Whether we call each other, we exchange number that same night, and we will share scheduled meetings, whether on virtual meetings or just make a phone call and so on. And that's where it started.
So how long after meeting Katrina online did you actually get to see her in person? Because it is through your relationship with Katrina, eventually, I mean, she became your wife, that you actually came to Barbados. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So how long after meeting her online did you actually come to Barbados? And were you actually looking forward to moving to Barbados for ministry and to be with this person who had more or less captured your heart?
To be frank with you, I wasn't even thinking about moving to Barbados. I was thinking about her moving or coming to me. I mean, she relocated to Jamaica. We met in 2011 in the summer. I could say it was August 4th, 2011, that we met online. And it was the following year, December, that we have decided that, I want to meet you because you are a nice person. You seem to be a very good person that, I could get to know and be around with every single day. So we arranged to meet the same year in December the 16th. But before that happened, she had a spiritual mother that guided her in every aspect of her life, help her to understand what are the situation, because she herself is also a minister, and she guides her in that aspect of her life. So she arranged for us to meet in some way, and I really want to thank her too for doing that. So we met on December 16, 2011, the same year, and we got to see each other. Well, my first time coming to Barbados, first time traveling on a plane, going anywhere, I was a bit nervous.
Very first time outside of Jamaica.
Outside of Jamaica, so that for me was a nerve-wracking experience. Coming here to Barbados was also a culture shock as well. Just to witness how life is here in Barbados, considering that the standard of living is good, that the people here are friendly, and you have a very beautiful country in terms of its landmass and so on, the features, the land, the air, and so on. So I love that about Barbados and also its people. Also, the food was one thing that I am still adjusting to. As I've said, it's a bit mild on some instances, but that's okay.
You prefer your spices.
I prefer my spices and so on. So we met, and she would take me around Barbados from the North Pole, from the North Coast, which was St. Lucie, to Christchurch. She would take me to Oyston. She would take me to Flora Cave, Harrison Cave, all the various attractions, even the submarine she took me out to, just for me to have a feel of Barbados and the people. She took me in town, took some pictures, and so on. And that for me gave me an experience to observe her as an individual, someone who is caring, someone who wants to share their life experience with you. And I find that very, very interesting and, very touching as an individual who has welcomed you wholeheartedly into their country and has embraced you as a person who is from outside. So from there, I think I could say that history will tell. From there, as we continue to grow together, and we're still growing together, because there's never a time that we don't learn something new about each other each day. And so we have been together from 2011. We got engaged a couple of years because I was still studying at UTC. And during that period of time, it helps me to better appreciate her while appreciating my studies as well. It was never easy having a relationship and actually studying at the same time. It was never easy, so she would help me sometimes to manage my time wisely so that I don't get distracted by the way. And it worked out quite well, as you can see, and graduated. After graduation, we had already made plans to get married the, the same year. But before that could happen, the head office in Jamaica would have to investigate in terms of interview my future wife, because for every minister or every student pastor who has a spouse or perhaps someone of significance, they would like to interview them to see if they are up to the standard or for the challenge to become a minister's wife. And so they interviewed her, asked her a few questions and so on. So it was a bit nervous for her, knowing that it is like you're going into the military, you know, and you have to go through all these procedures before you can be, get screened and so on before you are, not really accepted, but they want to know who you are as a person so that you don't have a bad image.
And she passed her test.
Yeah, she passed her test with flying colors, I must say. So that happened, and I was also called into a separate interview because they realized that the relationship is serious. And for her in Barbados and for me in Jamaica, they were saying to me, what is the goal here? I said to her that, I said to the head office, which was the minister who was the head at the time, that I do love her, and the relationship is very serious. And so the head office in Jamaica made an arrangement with the head office in Barbados, pretty much in the Eastern West Indies province, to arrange for me to get a transfer from Jamaica to Barbados. And why Barbados? Because she's from Barbados. And so that happened within my final year at UTC.
So you were practically chosen to come to Barbados by your head office because of your connection with Katrina. Because of Katrina. Have you been able to adapt to life in Barbados?
Yes, I would say that I've adapted quite much. I would consider myself as one who is very flexible and very adaptable to changing circumstances. And yes, I have adapted quite a lot to the culture, the music, the food, the people, the atmosphere. And I must say that, it's a good atmosphere to be in compared to other countries and so on. It's good.
You talked about missing your Jamaican food, I think, during an interview that we had earlier. You spoke about having to adapt to the different music. You were not accustomed to the soca that we have here in Barbados, more accustomed to reggae and dancehall. And you also mentioned that you had even brought your own CDs to Barbados so you can listen to Jamaican music. You had also mentioned to me in an earlier interview that dealing with Barbadian people was not always easy. You had difficulty learning the language. I mean, most of us speak what we call Bajan, and you had difficulty adapting to that. Would you say that you're at a stage now where you are settled in ministry and settled in Barbados?
Well, coming here, let me put it this way, coming here to Barbados and, moving around and interacting with the people here, one of the things that would have been a challenge for me would be the language. I would say that they speak a little fast, and then again, the dialect may be a challenge for me. So sometimes I have to say to the person to slow down. For example, if I'm in a meeting, person may say something and I don't hear. So I have to say to them to repeat over and over. And sometimes it can be annoying because you can see it on their face or their faces at times. But I say to them that you have to take your time and speak so I can understand. Because if I don't understand, then I can't respond effectively. So I have gotten over that hurdle because I understand the tonality in terms of how people speak here and how persons respond in a certain way. So most of the time I use contact clues to understand persons in such a way so that I can be better engaging with them. I would say that I am settled to some extent as it relates to my ministry, being effective to my people, leading them and encouraging them in the way that I do. As I have mentioned earlier, that I also love a field ministry, which is love to visit the elderly. For me, I love to be around them. I love to be in touch with their reality because I find that persons are more encouraged when their pastor come to them rather than them coming to their pastors. So I find that very encouraging for them and for me to share in that experience with them. So I would say that yes, I have settled somewhat in the culture of Barbados, and
When you compare Barbados to Jamaica, do you find that we tend to be dealing with the same societal problems or situations or issues that you yourself face in Jamaica?
Well, there are some issues that we face in Jamaica that is somewhat different. For example, crime is a major issue in Jamaica. We're here in Barbados, not to say that crime is not an issue, but in Jamaica it's a bit hostile in Jamaica than it is here in Barbados. So that's one of the issues. And also, education is also one of the issues as well. We as Jamaican, we are cultured in a way that we pay for our education. But here in Barbados, you only pay for your education if you're going to a private school. But if you're going to a public school, the government subsidizes in that regard for persons to go to school. So typically, education here is free, if I may say. Also, the health sector persons, I was made to understand that, health care is free. Whereas for Jamaican, for myself, it is not free. So everything we have to pay for. And the crime rate, I would say that here in Barbados, is a little safer. You can walk the streets and not feel in fear. But in Jamaica, you have to be mindful where you walk. There are certain garrisons, certain areas that you can't just walk in those areas as free as you would like. Persons will rob you, persons will kill you, and so on. So that's it. That's the difference between Barbados and Jamaica. And you can also say that the language too is also different as relates to the dialect and the patois. But then again, we can go around that, we can work around that, we can understand each other because we are both from English-speaking country, and we can learn from each other in aspect of our dialect and our patois and so on. So it has been a journey, a journey that I have embarked on, and it continues to be a journey that I still enjoy and still learning from it. So yes.
You mentioned that you love working with the elderly, that's where your passion is.
Yes.
You said you enjoy visiting them, just being around the elderly, and that's commendable. What about the youth? Do you work with young people as well?
Yes, I do work with the youth. Currently, at this point in time, I am stationed at 3 congregations: the Calvary, Grace Sale, and Full Neck congregations. And I would actually schedule myself to meet with each youth group. Sometimes you have 2 youth groups meeting on the same day. And I have to say to the head of the group that I will meet with you this week, but next week I will meet with the other group, so as to have myself as a part of their life experience, a part of their meeting, and so on, so that they can see the pastor, not just hear the pastor, but know that the pastor is there with them. And for me, I would say I consider myself as your friend. I want them to see me as your friend, someone who is a positive, has a positive impact on them, someone who looks out for the well-being of the young people. So yes, I do work with young people in various aspects. Just a couple weeks ago, I was in a practice band with the group at Calvary, and we were learning how to play the steel pan, learning how to play the drum, and so on. And we were there, and I was there with them, playing the steel pan, playing the drum, and we were there laughing. Some of us made mistakes, and we just giggle about it and so on. And it was a way in which for me to, to see into how they move with each other, how they interact, and how they interact with me, not as their pastor, but someone who is your friend as well. And it was a good experience as we talk, we laugh, and engage each other as we play along. And even some of them will tease me, "Oh, Pastor, you can't play the steel pan. Pastor, you can't play the drum." But we are there to learn together, and it was a learning experience for all of us. And I'm sure that they have appreciated my time with them as much as I appreciate their time to accept me in that way.
Do you think that is anything that needs to be achieved or done to pull our young people back into ministry, back into the church? Are you satisfied looking at our Barbadian society that youth are as involved as they could be in ministry? Is that an area that concerns you in any way?
Yes, I have thought about it in terms of how to attract young people back into the church. It comes right back to parents. You can do so much as a pastor, you can do so much as a member of the church, but yet again, it is the parents who have to take that step, that bold step, and encourage your children to go out. I can tell you about my experience over the years. Working here in Barbados, I have engaged a lot of parents. I have talked to them about their children, just welcoming them into church or just allowing them to go to church. You don't have to come to my church, but allow them to go to a church. But then again, they have the idea to say, sometimes the child doesn't feel like going to church. But I have to say to them that you are the parent. You don't make that decision for them when they're going to school to say, okay, they don't feel like going to school. They have to go to school because you know the benefit of going to school. So why is it you can't know the benefit of going to church? To give them that moral guide, that spiritual, understanding, to understand that they are not here to please themselves, but you are here for higher good, to worship God and to give him all thanks and praise. So that is where the challenge is. And I'm not even sure if we can actually go into the homes of persons and demand that or force persons to send your children to school. But all that we can do, and even for myself, is encourage them. And I am still in a conversation with many parents to send your children out to school. It's not enough to watch it online. It's not enough to stay home and say that, okay, I am listening to the message. But it's for you to come and to engage with persons. That's where Christian life begins, where you can practice Christian living and to be accountable to God as you live in love, in kindness, in joy, and in peace and gentleness. That's where that experience comes from. So we can't stay home and practice Christianity. We have to mingle with people, and we have to go out there and share that good news. So I would encourage any parent to send your children to church.
Do you encourage them to send them to Sunday school, or do you encourage them to bring them to Sunday school?
I would say both. Send them and also bring them. And you can also, go with them as well. Show them that, that you're there to encourage them and to let them know that, it is a good thing. All right? So I would encourage anyone to do that.
You said you grew up with your grandparents. Just want to go back there a little bit. Growing up with grandparents meant that there were certain values and standards and rules and regulations that, you had to follow, whether you liked it or not. Do you think that in our modern day time, that this whole aspect of the grandparent being the person that you turn to for advice, the person that you turn to for direction, for guidance, do you think that that's missing in our society today, merely because we have more younger mothers? You have grandmothers who are sometimes, by the time they're 35, they're grandparents. Do you think that that's an area that needs to be addressed from a church's viewpoint?
Well, I would say that the family structure has changed a lot over the years. Here in Barbados, you have a few single parents who are playing the role of a father, who are playing the role of a mother, even though they are a mother or probably they are a father. You may also have families who may have grandmother at home at the time. You may have some families who are nuclear family, mommy and daddy is at home, and so on. So I would say that, there is sometimes a lack of that guidance from the elderly within some families. I wouldn't say all, because I've been to some families and I've seen where the grandmother has taken a pretty good role in helping the mother and the father to help grow their child, help raise your child. So I would say that, in some families that the elderly advice and so on are lacking in some regard, maybe because of personal differences, maybe because of other things that may affect that relationship in some regard. So the only time children get to see their grandparents is when they go on a weekend, spend some holidays, or so on. But most of the time, they're with their parents. And sometimes the parents are so busy, they don't have time to even spend time with them, to talk to them about their life, their school, how they feel, and so on, and even their belief, and so on. So it also questions the parents' belief. What is your belief? And there are some persons who are disinterested in the church because they were hurt, they were bruised by someone, and maybe the pastor didn't do anything about it, and so on. And what is really happening in society where you have a lot of pastors who are doing wrong, that's also discouraging persons from coming to church. And the behavior of some persons may also discourage your own children. They don't have to say it, but it's there in their behavior, non-verbal communication. So we have to take a stand as a church to encourage persons to come out. Yes, we are not all perfect, but we're worshiping a God who's all perfect and who can make the wrong right, and he can forgive us of our sins.
How do you as a young pastor deal with issues like these? Especially, how do you as a young pastor deal with issues like these, especially issues that relate to the youth in relation to their parents? How do you relate? How do you cope? How do you manage? How do you counsel persons like these?
Well, sometimes persons will approach me on a one-to-one basis and say that they're going through this particular situation. And I will deal with it as best as I can within my own peripheral view and experience. If I can't, I'll refer them to someone else. At times, as it relates to the issues that are happening in Barbados, such as bullying, such as young people running away from home, or have mental issues, and so on, I often sit down, not only with the child, but also with the parent, to help them to understand what is really going on with the child. I wouldn't say that I'm a psychologist, but I see things from a pastoral point of view and from a godly point of view, a Christian point of view, to help them to see, perhaps God is showing you something. Perhaps God wants you to do something about it. And what God wants you to do is not to give up, but to allow him to step in. Because sometimes God uses different circumstances to get our attention so that we can allow God in. Because sometimes we find ourselves so stringent on doing a particular thing that God has to come in and break it up. And sometimes it might be something that we don't want, something we don't accept, and it happens in a way that it benefits us as a person. So normally I relate to persons through that crisis, through those scenarios, and so on. And even when I'm doing devotions with children, with young people, talking to them, they may ask me certain questions and so on. Sometimes questions I can't even answer in the public, but I was, call them one side and talk to them about it. Sometimes they're personal questions too. But, you have to understand that they themselves are wrestling with their own identity. They're wrestling with their own feelings, their own emotions. And these are some of the things that, parents need to be cognizant about. And so they themselves can be able to handle this situation effectively. Not to bark at them, not to shout at them, not to label them in certain ways, but to, to understand, because we weren't born big.
That's true.
We were at one stage small,
That's
and we
true.
perhaps were behaving like them. I was rude at one point. And, it took a long time for me to understand that. My father would often say to me, I couldn't believe that you become a quiet person because you were so noisy when you're young, you were so troublemaking, you were so mischievous and all kind of things. So I said, time change person. You become mature and you understand certain things. And that to say, having said that, grandparents have a role to play as well because they have experience, and sometimes we may not see eye to eye with them, but sometimes further down the road, you will understand that, listening to these persons sometimes give wisdom, and they have a lot to say and a lot to share with us as young people. So I have moved around, and I have, engaged person in different scenarios, devotions, forum, person-to-person interaction and counseling and so on, in different situations and so on. I'm even looking at a person now who has a mental challenge. I wouldn't say that she is, as some person say, she's mad or she has lost it, but she is mentally challenged in some sense, and she's thinking about killing herself. Persons have recommended her to me, for me to talk to her, and to see how best I can help her. But then again, you will come upon scenarios and challenges where this person don't want to talk to you. They don't want to interact with you because, I don't have a problem, and so on. So, it's going to take some time.
Are you satisfied with the role that your church, the Moravian Church, is playing, or in helping to shape the lives of the young people at your own ministry, at your own church? Would you say that you're pleased with the rate at which young people are coming into the church? I mean, it may seem as though I'm a young people a lot because you are a young pastor. I think you're still in your 30s. And I believe that you have the ability to reach some of these young people, because I'm really concerned about the youth in our society. Do you think that your church is playing its part in really reaching these young people?
I think the church is playing its part, but I also believe the church can do more in terms of reaching out to young people, because, to be frank, the young people are the life and blood of the church. And we need young people to help to move the church forward. I will often say that the church in general needs to do more in being pragmatic in terms of applying its own application to reach out to young people. I think for some time now we have become so ceremonially holy that we become so fixed to the church. But church only happens within the four walls. Since COVID-19, we are now having church online. You're now having church in the city. And so sometimes as a church, we can go to the young people and have church with them. You perhaps don't have to have church with them either. Be their friend. Mingle with them, talk with them, interact with them, and see how best you can support whatever they're going through, because they just want someone to talk to.
So you're basically saying the church needs to come out from behind the four walls.
Yes.
Yes. But in so doing, how can not just like your church, for instance, work towards getting closing shop sometimes, closing church sometimes, going out in the community? How often would you say that you do that as a minister?
Yes.
Do you do that as a minister?
I'm going to share with you an experience. Every year, we normally go out for outdoor worship, and we will plan our worship probably within the park, perhaps near the seaside or the beach, and we'll have service there. And what I realized is that you have more young people coming out to those services than coming to church, the physical church. And that means for us that we need to have more church in the community where we can meet the young people. Sometimes all that it takes is for us to go to them. We cannot sit in our office and expect them to come to us. That's why I consider myself as one who loves the field ministry. Because when you get out there, you meet a whole host of people who need help. And there are more help that are out there, that person who need help, than in the church. And we need, as pastors and leaders of the church, to get our feet wet, to get out there and to spread the gospel, interact with people, get to know them. And that's I believe where we're lacking. You
believe that you do that, but you said just now that you go, I think, once a year.
Yes, once a year.
Do you think once a year is enough?
That's what I said, that the church needs to do more. We need to do a lot more. Not just one time per year, but we need to evaluate it and say, okay, can we do it 3 times a month? Can we do it every time a month? And see how we can go from there and encourage persons. Go to door and so on. For me, I do, sometimes I will do a walk in the community. Let persons see who is a pastor within the community church, because I believe that the church is for the community as well as the community is for the church. And so I walk within the community, advertising not only my church but myself as a pastor, and that I am not just coming to your home because I want you to come to my church. I'm coming to your home to spread the gospel. I'm coming to your home to share good news, that I am here and I care about you. Yes, I might not know you, but I'm willing to help, I'm willing to share, and I'm willing to build on a relationship with you. And that is the concept and the principle that we need to take as a country and as a church, you know, because sometimes we can become so busy, and sometimes busy doing what? That we lose ourselves. So we need to ask God to give us His discerning spirit, that we can see the leading of His Spirit in the field of ministry that He wants us to embark on.
Has COVID-19 impacted you in any way as a minister in terms of church attendance, having to perhaps play the role of quote-unquote provider? Has it impacted you? How has it impacted you?
It has impacted me in so many ways, I would say, let's say, in terms of doing community ministry. I still do. I mean, after the protocols have relaxed a little bit, and person can meet persons and so on, there are still other persons who are a bit reluctant in having me around because of the COVID fear and so on. I would say that it has affected my social life in terms of going out with my family, also meeting people, walking and doing community walk and doing prayer and so on, and encouraging persons within the community, because persons are a bit fearful in that sense. So that is where I sense there is where COVID-19 has affected that part of my life in ministry. It has affected other parts as well, but those are the two that I think are significant at this point in time. It is easier said than done to say all of that COVID-19 did all this, but what are we doing to make change? We have to make some adjustment where it's applicable so that we can better reach our people rather than to leave them out there squandering. And what we have developed is the feeding program. The feeding program was going on long before I got to Calvary Moravian Church, and that is one of the ministry that we use to feed those persons and to care for those persons who are homeless, who have no food, and need someone to speak to them and to encourage them. And so often, we encourage those persons off the street to come to our church, because that is where we have the feeding program. And I will sometimes do devotion, do the prayer, and just give them some kind of encouragement. It might not be long, probably just a 5-minute or 10-minute devotion, just to speak into their life, because sometimes they're going through some hard times, and these are persons who are mentally challenged. These are persons who have lost their job and have life have hit them so hard that they have no way to turn, and just need someone to speak to them and to encourage them. And I've done so much of that, and the church has continued to share that kind of ministry in feeding those persons. And I believe that we have touched so many young, old, in between, and so on, who have come and have said thanks for the word, thank you, and so on. So even yesterday, one of them came to me and said, I haven't seen you for a while. What happened? And I said to him, I was on vacation. He said that I really missed you. I wanted to say thank you for the devotions and for the encouragement and so on that you have given me. It really helped me in times of need. So this is the kind of way that we can reach persons. Yes, not all of them will come to you, but sometimes you have to reach out to them.
What would you say is the greatest need, or you see as the greatest need within this current COVID-19 climate? What's the greatest need? Is it a case where persons need to be, they're more challenged mentally, they're more challenged financially, they're more challenged spiritually? What do you see as the greatest need?
I think what you mentioned, I think that's all of the above. There are persons who are challenged in those areas financially, emotionally, because of what is really happening right now. And what is really lacking in some sense, I could say this, and there are other churches that are doing it, where the churches need to provide a place, not really a place, but a situation in which they can provide for persons who are suffering. For example, charitable events. Persons who have no food. You could feed those persons who have no food. Persons who can't take care of their family. We can provide some financial means, or perhaps, partner with some institution that will able to, help these persons. You have different clubs in Barbados. You have different non-governmental organizations in Barbados that will be willing to, be on board in a partnership with the church to venture out in different communities to, find the needs of these persons. And as you have said, financial needs. There are a lot of persons who are in need of personal finances. It's not just for us to provide a means of finance for them, but to help them to get back on their feet.
Right.
We can also help them to improve their skills and to be an entrepreneur. We could help them to realize their own potential and to help persons who might be going through some hard times. And even through that experience, we perhaps may find that there are persons who are going through some various, aspect of their life that we ourselves can minister to them, not only in their finances, not only in their emotional state of mind, but also in other areas of their life that may need some kind of help, dealing with children.
So you're saying more than ever that the church has to be more holistic in,
yes,
its approach.
And proactive too in the approach to the society, because if you're not careful, then we will lose our stance in society. I mean, I heard one person said to me that the church is not a church, the society is a secular society. Because in a sense, that person are no longer looking to the church for guidance and for, a way out of their situation, but they're looking to other means, finances, they're looking to other secular situations that may appease them in some ways. They're no longer looking to the church. And that is where the church is lacking, reaching out to these persons, partnering with other organizations to show them that, there's a greater need for us to accomplish, and there's a greater need for us to serve the community and the society at large. Because we as a people, we need God. Yes, person may not believe in God to some extent because they have a different religion and so on, but we all have a need. We all have a need. And if you look at it in terms of life and the aspect of how we were created, how we were born, how we were raised, and all of that, from the cell to the tissue to the organ to the system, all of that, don't it ever occur to you that it has to be someone who is more powerful, someone who is more creative, who has created us? To think about it. But some persons, they're not thinking about that. They're thinking about survival. Thinking about how can I make $1? How can I provide for my family? How can I do this? How can I do that? And so sometimes we need to get out there to get a taste of what persons are really going through so that we can touch them and help change their concept, their understanding of life, because I think they have a wrong understanding of life. And that is why we find many countries are going through the dilemma that they're going through in terms of crime, in terms of violence, and other things that are affecting them on a holistic way.
As we look at the whole holistic approach of ministry, especially within this particular COVID-19 climate, you mentioned that your church, Calvary Moravian, has a feeding program. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, the feeding program started some years ago by, well, I'm not going to say his name, but it was a minister at the time who was there, and he had started the ministry some years ago. And every Wednesday, every Tuesdays and Thursdays of each week, we will have a feeding program where we cook different meals for them, and we will serve those meals in containers, and we will also offer them a drink as well.
So these meals are for whom?
These are for persons who are homeless. Anyone who
I mean, these are persons that can just come to your church and be fed? Or do you all go out and take the meals to persons out there?
No, they come to us.
They come to us, okay.
Because we have the facility at the church. So we don't have the facility yet or the resources so that we can move around, cook the food, and provide it to those persons who can't make it to the church and so on. I think that's a good idea to look at and see how best we can improve on that area. But as I've said, on Tuesdays and Wednesdays at 12, we have our feeding program, and we cook different meals for them, and they will come. We have our devotion, a little prayer, and then we start to give them their meals. On different events, such as, for example, on Easter and on Christmas, we often, treat them a little special, give them a little gift, give them a little dinner and a little ham and so on, the Christmas dinner and so on, to let them feel good about themselves, to let them know that the church, cares for them and want the best for them. And sometimes you may get a little
issue with them, sometimes they can't wait because they come and they want the food right now. And that's a time where I can minister to them to help them to understand it is not just about you getting what you want. All right? So, yes, we treat them special on Christmas Day, treat them special on Easter, and other occasions as well.
You keep saying you treat them. So them refers to anybody?
Yes, in a generic sense, yes. I wouldn't want to, exclude anyone because we have persons who might be going through some difficult situations, and we have persons who, they just can't provide food today, and they just come in, they give their name, and we give them something to eat. We don't exclude anyone. Let me put it that way. We don't exclude anyone.
So in terms of numbers, how many persons do you feed? You said it's twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Right now,
Those numbers.
the numbers are from 40 to about 70. Before, it was about in the hundreds. Sometimes we get 130, 123, and thereabout persons coming.
So it has gone from 100 to about just 14 persons?
40 to 70 persons right now. I guess because of the COVID situation, there are persons who are, not coming. They will send someone else to come and pick up their food and so on.
No, I want to, with the few minutes that we have left, I want to find out from you what it is that you would want to achieve in your life as a minister, as a pastor, let's say within the next 5 years or so. What it is where does that old birdie want to see himself 5 years from now?
Looking at myself 5 years from now, I want to continue in the work of Christ to do what Christ wants me to do. Some person may say, that, I want to be successful. I want to grow my own business. I want to do this. I want to do that. But working in ministry and working for Christ is never, ever about yourself.
That's true.
It's never, ever about your personal goals. Because at the end of the day, you're not working to fulfill your own desires, but the desires that God has on your life. So I want to continue to do that to please God wherever He takes me. And that can take many forms.
Even if it takes you away from Barbados.
Precisely.
Maybe back to Jamaica. You'll be happy.
Who knows? Who knows? And, as I've said, it can take many forms. God can say, okay, I want you to be a missionary. Or I want you to be someone who wants to do a church, set up a church in the community and minister to the people there. There's a greater need there rather than the church. I'm just saying. So my goal in the next 5 years is to continue to do what God wants me to do and to be faithful to Him. And not to allow myself to be distracted along the way. Yes, I may have personal goals that I want to achieve, but put that aside for the moment. Right now, I want to do what is right for the Lord.
And you did mention to me that you're willing to go wherever God sends you. You're willing to do whatever He tells you to do. But you also said to me that you take your family into consideration. You're the father of a two-year-old girl. So you must take the family into consideration. You're willing to do that.
Yes, as I've said, personal goals, yes, I do have personal goals. But at the same time, I would have to consider that I am in the role as a pastor. And whatever I do will also affect my family. So I have to make sure that I balance both the work of God and my family work. All right, so, and I will continue to pray about it. If it's something that God wants me to take me to or somewhere, then I would have to pray about it, discuss it with my wife, and we pray about it. And I'm sure that God will not want to split us up, or God will want to call me somewhere, that will jeopardize my own relationship. So I think that what God wants for me is to be faithful to Him, as well as He wants me to be faithful to my wife.
To your wife and your daughter. Yes. Any words of encouragement to Barbadians at this time of the year, as we just celebrated our independence, we're approaching the Christmas season? Parting words for Barbadians at this stage?
I would like to say to Barbadians this time, as we recognize the Advent season, even as you have recognized your independence, that it is a significant milestone for you, knowing that you have, gained this kind of leverage as a sovereign nation, and it's something for you to be proud of. And I want to encourage you to continue to be happy about your independence and what you have achieved over the years. As we journey through the Advent season, recognizing that the season is not all about the festivity, but it's about recognizing the Christ-like child who came into the world to save us from our sins, whether or not we want to recognize it or not. But it's the time to recognize and to acknowledge the birth of Christ into our world. The next thing is that there are a lot of persons who are going through a rough patch, I would say, in their life, and I want to encourage them to let them know that you're never alone. God is always there with you. Yes, he might be silent. Yes, you might feel the pain and the pinch, but God never promised us a life that is free of all challenges and stress.
That's true.
And so God uses these things to help us, to mold us and to shape us so that we can be a better person, the better version of ourselves, and so that we can be an encourager and inspiration to someone else out there. So I just want to encourage all those persons in Barbados, not only in Barbados, but elsewhere, that, God is there with you, and he will there to encourage you and to help you through. He will show you the way. I want to share a story too that someone has shared with me, that this gentleman who wanted to kill himself because he had one banana and that was the only thing he had left. And he ate that one banana, threw it on the ground, went up on the tree to hang himself. But before he hung himself, he saw someone who walked under the tree and saw the banana skin, took it up and ate it. He realized that there was someone worse off than him.
Yes.
So whenever you think that you are the worst of all, there's someone else who is worse off than you.
That's
and God will help you through.
We want to thank you, Reverend Birdie, for being our guest today on Midday Manna. And we want to thank you folks at home for joining us. We thank you for being part of our program, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. We want to thank all of you for your support, and join us again next week. God bless you.
Let your manna fall from heaven. Shower down your word from up above. Grace and truth are what we're craving. Manifest your blessings and your love. Here with your midday manna.